Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drum McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Justin Grimes, founder and CEO of Stick With It and Apply to Graduate School. Justin spearheads an education and consulting enterprise that facilitates connections between individuals and organizations, offering insights and resources on diversity, equity, and inclusion in graduate education. His work assists individuals and institutions in navigating career and educational decisions, provides strategies to higher ed institutions and prospective graduate students to propel them towards success. Justin joins us today to talk about how institutions can turn around their enrollment, especially their grad school enrollment, through the principles of strategic enrollment management and what he calls keeping it simple and real. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to our conversation. You are in a very niche area about talking about increasing graduate school enrollment, especially around minorities. How did you get the expertise in this particular area?
So the expertise really came from both my doctoral work and research, as well as experiences working in higher education over 17 years. So the front half of my higher education experience was in student affairs. And then when I decided to pursue my graduate degree at the University of Georgia, I had the privilege of having a doctoral internship in the graduate school. And that was really the impetus for everything graduate school related in my career, from my research topic, really looking at what factors influence Black males to pursue PhDs in education and really researching why people decide to go to graduate school, and working in that office in the business section, in the recruitment section, and then post-doctoral degree working in the graduate school at Virginia Tech. And I had the unique opportunity to do diversity, equity, and inclusion support and programming, as well as recruitment and admissions. And so that to me really shaped my entry into this field of graduate education.
Very good. Well, that's interesting. Now, University of Georgia, they're the Tigers, right? No, sorry.
No, we are those wonderful Georgia Bulldogs.
I
jokingly tell people, I'm not a Tiger fan. At one point, I'm born and raised in Arkansas. And so at one point, LSU was a huge rival. So as I used to jokingly tell people, I don't deal with anything Tigers, not Clemson, LSU, not the Zoo Tigers, none of them.
Well, I apologize. I couldn't resist on that one.
Yeah.
So we've got a problem with enrollment here in the U.S., and it's not only undergraduate. Everybody knows about the enrollment cliff or the demographic cliff, whatever you call it. The birth rate dropped off because of the Great Recession. Graduate studies saved us from a much deeper cliff, but even the graduate studies are backing off. They're not as robust from an enrollment. In fact, the enrollment's starting to decrease, is it not?
It has. The Council of Graduate Schools published a report. It's called the Graduate Enrollment in Degrees 2012 to 2022, of which they outlined that enrollment decreased by 6.9%.
Whoa.
In this 10-year span. And some of the areas or groups that experienced the greatest decrease were those who are underrepresented minorities. Domestic students started to see a decline. And if we had to pick a field of study that has seen the greatest decline, it was engineering. And that report indicated that engineering fields were down 16.1% in enrollment. So we have a really challenging issue ahead of us right now with graduate enrollment.
Well, 16% drop in engineering, that's significant. There's
Absolutely.
a lot more engineering jobs out there that need to be filled than there are people. Was there any kind of breakdown from a demographics perspective, i.e., did they break down the numbers?
Absolutely. They did break down the numbers. So in that report, The group that had the lowest decrease were African American Black. They were down by 7.8%. Domestic first time graduate enrollment declined by 4.7% between fall 21 and fall 22. Other information, of course, again, as I stated, African American Black had the lowest rate. Another area that we saw some changes in decline were around full time graduates. So full time started to see, well, let me say it differently. Full time and for profit institutions saw a slight increase, but full time graduate students who were in, I would say, your more traditional brick and mortar institutions started to see a decline. But in that report, they outline a lot of breakdown in terms of each demographic in a racial minoritized population.
Mm-hmm. That's very concerning. But it also, to me, says an opportunity is there to turn that around and start to increase enrollments. Do you agree with that?
I would agree, definitely. I think, and one of the things I tell people right now is because we see this decline in enrollment, but there are still, as you've already mentioned, a need in many industries and fields for more skilled, talented individuals who possess these degrees, on top of what the Bureau of Labor Statistics is predicting around the number of or percentage of jobs that will require graduate degrees. I think this is an excellent time for students, for institutions to be really looking at graduate education as a means for career progression and really thinking through what are the strategies and processes needed in order for that to be successful.
I think this, and I agree with that. I think to set the framework, the foundational piece for our conversation today, I think we need to talk a little bit, or at least get started with what's the difference between recruitment and admissions?
Absolutely. I tell folks when I work with them, when I'm talking to faculty, board members, whatever the group is, that oftentimes many graduate programs are doing graduate admissions work and they're not necessarily doing graduate recruitment. And so graduate admissions really involves the reviewing of application materials and making enrollment decisions. It typically doesn't involve direct interaction with prospective students, but it's about deciding who gets in to graduate school. While recruitment is about attracting and engaging with individuals who want to explore a graduate program actively. Recruiters may not always have the insight into the application status of a prospective student, whereas those who do admissions work will. They'll know exactly where you are with submitting your materials. They'll know your scores, all these types of things that go into your admission into it. And successful recruitment for me requires very thought out, well orchestrated communication, email outreach, follow ups, persuasion, and marketing of your program to a diverse group of prospective students and individuals. And lastly, it's about making the connection between the proposition value, the value added as a result of being able to get this degree.
And I think that's a key point that we need to discuss in a little bit is what is that value proposition? Because most institutions, I'd say probably about a quarter to a half of them understand what their value proposition is, but the vast majority don't. Now, before we jump into things like the enrollment funnel, that's clearly sales, okay? To me, this is a difference between marketing and sales. The marketing is getting the word out there, figuring out who your target audience is, who are the people that would want to come with. And that is a strategic decision, isn't it?
Absolutely a strategic decision.
So with that, your board, your administration needs to figure out, one, who you are, and then secondly, how are you going to reach out to, once you figure out who you are, where are the students that would be interested in your programs? That's, to me, is a marketing question.
Absolutely. And I would even add to that is who do individuals say we are? So we have our own narrative and perspective as members of an institution around what we offer, what we value. And then there's the public perception. That public perception can sometimes drive decisions for prospective students, but no matter what, it definitely has an impact.
You mean that what we think we are and what the outside folks think we are two different things? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Every day of the week, right? You give me one person who looks at US News World Rankings, and you give me a person who looks at some other marker of success or another periodical, such as diverse issues in higher education. And we're going to see, sometimes two different perspectives related to the value of this graduate program, their prestige, their accolades, and what they're going to provide me as an individual considering graduate education.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we get into strategic enrollment management. As I was doing a little research for our conversation today, I went up and took a look on, where else? Google. They and Wikipedia are the two authorities on everything, aren't they? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Some will say so.
Yes, absolutely. Strategic enrollment, as defined by the University of Northern Colorado, is defined as a comprehensive process that helps institutions determine, achieve, and maintain their optimal recruitment, retention, persistence, and graduation rates, where optimal is defined as in the academic context of the institution. So that is taking into account not only the marketing aspects, the recruitment, which is the sales, and the admissions, which is the process. Does that make sense?
It does. And I really like that definition that they use to describe the way that this process works, because graduate recruitment and admissions is very much connected into their enrollment management strategies.
Mm-hmm. And so we've talked a little bit about the marketing, and that's not what we're going to talk about today, the public perception. We're going to talk more about the recruitment and then the admissions process. But to give us a good understanding of that, I think we need to look through the enrollment funnel and what that is. Would you take us through that?
So one of the things that I talk about and want people to know is that there are different types of recruits, prospective students in this funnel, right? And so everybody enters into a different stage. And so I'll go through the 5 types of students that fit within this funnel. So the first group of students are the potential students. Typically these are undergraduate students, working professionals, a lot of them who have recently graduated with a bachelor's degree, and they have limited interaction. Oftentimes institutions have very limited interaction with these individuals, but they are very curious about graduate education. You can find these individuals at historically Black colleges and universities, minority serving institutions, predominantly white institutions, liberal arts colleges. They are spread across higher education. And one of the things that people want to do when they are looking at how to address the potential students is to talk about why they should pursue a graduate degree, what you can offer them in terms of program, funding, services, supports, and also talking to them about what you're looking for. So if you're a particular program that offers master's degrees, what are you looking for in your prospective students? What are you looking for in potential students? And then the career outcomes of this group.
Mm-hmm.
The second group in that funnel are prospective students. And so prospective students are potential students, but they have actually started to engage with you a lot more. So these are the students who are attending your recruitment events. They're going and attending the faculty visitations. They're showing up for the recruitment weekends. They're at the conferences that you're located at. And what you want to tell this group is you want to talk to them about pursuing a graduate degree and the significance of it, how to apply for their particular programs that you offer, what you're looking for in a student. And specifically, you really want to talk to them about the funding options. And so these are students you want to connect with. And the ultimate goal really is to show off what you do and show off what you offer.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I would assume that not only is what you're offering, but what you can give to them, i.e., salary bumps, et cetera, job placement, those type of things. Not specifics, but this is what typically students who go through our institution, they see a bump in their pay, et cetera. So there's got to be what I call the WIFM, the what's in it for me for this prospective student.
Students want to know, and they want to be able to see this information listed. They want to know that when they're having conversations with faculty and departments, institutional staff and members, that they understand that for a lot of them, this is about career outcomes and what they're going to achieve. And so those who are able to speak specifically to those career outcomes field specific have a greater opportunity to, what I would say, convert these prospective students to applicants. And that's the next group in the funnel. And so these individuals have already expressed interest in your program. They've already started the application. Sometimes they may be stuck in a phase on the application portal where they haven't hit submit, but they begin to upload a lot of information about themselves. And so really the job of universities at that point is to connect these students to on-campus resources, to talk with them about different things such as application fee waivers, always talk to them about funding and other initiatives initiatives you have for students over the age of 30, first gen, diversity initiatives. These are the things you want to talk to them because there's something that's preventing them or causing them to pause on hitting submit. And so this often is when you have some type of management system that you're using for your applications and you have email campaigns or things you can send out. This is when you want to be real intentional with this group.
And with these folks, these are the ones who are applying. They haven't hit the submit button yet. They're solding up. You need to be real specific with the messages you're sending them. You need to have more personalized reach out to them than you would for somebody who is at the beginning of the pipeline, correct?
Absolutely. This is when a faculty member doing some follow-up, this is when your email's going out and being specific. Hey, we see you haven't completed your application. Would you be willing to jump on a 15-minute virtual phone call with one of our faculty members? Hey, we got an upcoming virtual event. Would you mind joining us there? And that's when you're going to be able to get the opportunity to find out what's the reason why they haven't hit submit and making sure that you answer or respond to whatever those issues or concerns are for that student.
Great. So you get them to hit submit, they're admitted.
Absolutely. That's our next group. So the next group, the fourth group, are the admitted students. These are students that, again, have already completed the application materials. You have reviewed their information. They may have participated in an interview weekend, maybe for funding or just in general for programs to make their decisions. But nevertheless, this student has already received admissions. And so here's the challenge with that group is they may not have replied yet, to your admissions request or information indicating that, hey, we're offering you this. This is what the assistantship looks like. This is what the funding looks like. Here's what we're offering you. And so now it's going to be making sure with this group that you follow up again by answering any questions, provide additional resources. By this time, you begin to know this candidate a lot more. You may know that they have a family, so they're really concerned about childcare. You may know they live in another state, so they're concerned about, relocation. You know that this person may be working professional, and so what are the resources they need there? And this, again, regardless of the institutional type, this is the group that excites a lot of individuals because they're already in, and we just don't want to get them to the finish line, which is to start enrolling.
Absolutely. So the enrollment is, you're answering a lot of questions for them. And then there's that old, the saying from the movie, show me the money.
Absolutely. So that last group in the funnel are the enrolled students. These are students who have already went onto your university website, looked at the graduate school catalog. They already have been assigned a faculty mentor or advisor. They're here, right? And here what I mean is that they're already officially a student of the university, of the institution. The challenge with this group that people need to really consider is starting them day one, like making sure that they show up day one, right? So they're listed on your roster or on your group when you're looking at your online website, Blackboard, whatever it may be. But this is the group that you want to answer any questions within the first few weeks, because sometimes you still have folks that have a little bit of buyer's remorse if we're looking at it from that model. And so they may still decide that this is not what they want to do. But oftentimes when you reach the stage of or in the funnel of being an enrolled student, you're committed.
So in moving along, and it always amazes me how quickly these conversations go. We've already been doing this 20 minutes and we're halfway through all the information we want to go through. So when I look at it from the strategic enrollment management, we touched on this a little bit. The institution needs to really know who it is, but that knowing who it is also goes further down to what the program is, what the particular college within the university is, knowing your mission and knowing what your value proposition is. To me, that's marketing 101.
Absolutely. And to add to that, it's not only for individuals within the institution to know that, but for people to be able to look on the website and see this information explicitly stated. When I talk to graduate programs about their recruitment needs or the challenges they're facing, oftentimes I start with asking them the question, where do students go to find out about information related to applying to graduate school? And do they have multiple touch points to receive the same information? If I have the link on my department website to the application, I hope that's the same updated link that the graduate school is using. And sometimes these challenges to exist, but you want to make sure that programs are making sure that they are explicitly stating what they stand for, what the opportunities are, what value these degrees provide them with on your departmental website, on your graduate school website. People want to see themselves represented. They want to see information about the program and what it's going to be like.
One of the neatest things that I've ever seen was a montage of people's photos, students' photos. And, human nature, we're going to click on somebody's photo that we identify with. And when they click on that photo, you'll hear that person's story, or you'll be able to read that person's story, what they came to school for, they've graduated, it's all alumni, etc. To me, that's a great way to get people to start to identify with the school.
I would agree. One example that I love to use is Georgetown. So Georgetown has a video that's described as the life in grad school. So on this video, you can look it up on YouTube, you wind up seeing a description of an experience, right? This student goes through their entire day of being a graduate student, their interactions and engagement with their classmates, their interactions and engagement with faculty, the types of research that they're doing. You are able to, from that video, understand not only the expectation of those who are attending this program or what it's like to be in graduate school, but you're able to see yourself represented and say, I can do this, right? And so often I find too many programs don't have enough content information on there. They don't have enough photos. They don't have enough videos showing to the person looking at it, this is what it's like to be a part of our program. And I often tell them, you've got to add more information on your website besides the words. People want to see what it's like.
I can relate completely. I remember when I started my doctoral program, and it was in human and organization systems. I was a physics major undergraduate. It had been 20 years since I had been to any kind of school, and I felt so far out of my league until I went and attended. They opened the dissertation, the PhD defenses to anybody who wanted to come. And I went and I listened to one, and I was like, I can do this. And from that point on, it wasn't, oh, I can't do this. It was like, I can do this. It was
absolutely
huge thing to be able to do that. So to be able to identify, and in the DEI world, they talk about belonging. This is belonging. Do I belong at graduate school? Well, the answer to that for 95% of people is yes. But you have to believe that yourself, and that's one of the ways to do that. Let's talk a little bit about recruitment strategies, because with the enrollments dropping off as they are, we need to do things a little differently than we've done in the past, do we not?
I would definitely say that. We most definitely have to start to begin to think through what the future of higher education is going to look like, in particular with graduate education. And so for me, in order to look forward, we have to look back. And we need to look at not only the historical context around our institution's mission and vision and goals, but look at the data that drives a lot of decisions to help people understand what are the trends, what are the gaps.
Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because you mentioned data. The accreditors would love you because you're talking about data-driven decisions. But you've also got to look at where markets are going. You also need to take a look at where are your potential students.
I would agree. And so one of the things that I tell people to do is, particularly with data, is really looking at what is the story being told through our data. Who's missing from our demographics? If we're a program that historically has provided access, admissions to majority of those who identify as male or men, then we have a challenge there, right? And so in a conversation, people are often bringing up, we want to find our URMs, our underrepresented minoritized groups. And so too often, I think people are starting to look at race and gender, but there's so many other identifiers, demographics that are important to this. And so I always encourage people to really look at who's missing and figure out why have they been missing. And sometimes we got to look at the demographic and information that represents our faculty. We also need to look at other markers and places where students are. One example that I give people is to look at diverse issues in higher ed. So diverse issues in higher ed produces a top 100 every single year. And so their top 100 degree rankings, they rank institutions by those who confer the most degrees for minority students. For example, me, I identify as Black. So if I'm looking for a program that tends to graduate the most number of Black doctoral students in a specific field, I might look at this top 100. It's available on their website. I might look at this and see that this institution or these types of institutions tend to thrive. And so I encourage institutions to look at that, to see where do you rank, right? And if you don't see yourself ranked on that list, here's a place where you got a lot of work to do. And it's achievable. There's ways to shift and change that. We can talk about that more. But people need to definitely spend time looking at the trends, looking at the gaps, looking at the future related to how many can we actually enroll. If we're a program that offers full funding, how many can we afford to fund? Where are we in our grant cycles and being able to admit more students? What happens? Are we in a field that is changing and evolving? In particular, where we're competing against new forms of technologies or just interest in general. Do we typically have a lot of international students and not enough domestic? Whatever the challenge is, data is going to help reveal that to you.
Absolutely. And so with that, once you've identified the types of recruits that you want, build your campus story, and telling it on your website, what goes from there?
From there, you want to start really to review the content that shows what it's like to be that. So that is going to be looking on your website. I often recommend to institutions to go through what I say the 3-click process. So can I find information that I'm looking for as a prospective student within 3 clicks? Can I find the GPA or GRE requirement, GMAT requirement, test score requirement within 3 clicks? Can I find the application link to apply to graduate school within 3 clicks? Can I find information about the faculty and their research, maybe even their CVs within 3 clicks? And so these are the types of things that people really want to work on developing, is that type of information. And then the next thing is really understanding and talking about pathway opportunities and community partnerships. That's a really important one.
Yeah. Before we get into that pathway opportunities and community partnerships, I want to emphasize that 3-click rule. And it's not just 3 clicks. If you hit the right click, it's 3 clicks from multiple areas. Am I right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
People should be able to go to multiple places on an institution's website and find the information that they're looking for.
I can't tell you the number of higher ed institutions that I look at, and I'm trying to find specific information, whether it's student outcomes, whether it's the board of trustees, the names, where their meetings are. And I have to click 5, 6, 7 times to find that information. If I'm a prospective student, you've lost me. You've already lost me.
Yeah, you definitely have lost me. And it begins to create my perception around the institution, institutional fit, my perception around institutional effectiveness. And none of these things necessarily may be accurate indicators or accurate stories in people's minds, but I am at the beginning to start formulating ideas around this. And this may make me say, you know what, this institution was in my top 3. And I'm looking at 2 other institutions that also are very comparable. And so because of not being able to find the things that I need within 3 clicks, I'm now going to remove this from my top 3 and replace it with another.
And along those lines is, don't think about it from looking at your desktop computer. You've got to think about it from using a phone to get at that information.
Absolutely. And my strategy for institutions to address the 3-click rule is talk with your current students. Ask your current students to give them 3 or 5 different things that you want them to review and see if they can find it within 3 clicks. These are the people, especially, your first year students, they're the most recent, recently actively looking at this. So that's a quick strategy of how you can address the 3-click rule is talking with your current students and alums. That's another area, another group to really tap into to help you to understand what are the issues, what are the challenges, the gaps, the 3-click rule, all these types of things.
Mm-hmm. Pathway opportunities and community partnerships. This is critical stuff. I know one institution, Dave Decker, president of Franklin University, they have agreements with over 1,200 different community colleges to be able to accept enrollments, and they already have the course equivalents mapped into their computer system so that they know when a student presents their transcript, they already know what credits are going to be accepted, and they go beyond that. I mean, that's an example of a pathway opportunity. What are some of the other ones that folks need to be looking at?
I can name a couple of them that I think are really, really helpful. One, I'm bragging on my own, alma mater, University of Georgia. They have this program called the FUSE program.
University of Alabama, is that what you said?
I wish them nothing but the best. And congratulations to Nick Saban on his retirement. But at UGA, we have this program called the FUSE program, facilitating underrepresented student experiences. And so this is a pathway program for students from certain HBCUs, generally relatively close to the University of Georgia, Clark, Spelman, Morehouse, Florida A&M University, which I'll talk about too. They create opportunities where assistantships are provided to this group. Tuition is often reduced to a particular amount per credit hour. I think it's like $25 per semester. They provide them with a stipend, and they begin to start their graduate program the summer before they enroll in the fall.
Wow.
So this is a great pathway in the sense that students who are coming from HBCU or minority serving institution are coming from a place that tends to be racially homogenous in a way. And they often are entering into environments where they may not be the only one who looks like them. And so that transition is not always easy. And so I applaud UGA for thinking through that and saying, how can we make this path into graduate school easier for this group? Another group that I think about is Florida A&M University. They have what they call the Graduate Feeders Program. It's a stellar program where they go through, and students who are in this program, I believe it's 1 to 2 years, they go through training around applying to graduate school, writing personal statements, interviewing. You are getting the cream of the crop. You're getting top students who are very well versed in not only preparing for graduate education, but they're going to be successful. And they have a history and a track record with doing this. And then the last one I will mention is the fraternity that I'm a part of, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. We have a partnership with Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. And so members of our fraternity, our brotherhood, are able to receive application fee waivers and opportunity to receive less than 3 full tuition fellowships to be admitted into the Kelley School of Business full-time in residence MBA program. So there are a lot of places that I recommend institutions look into. Your Greek organizations, look into your HBCUs and MSIs, look into creating pathway programs that make the transition much easier for individuals, underrepresented, students of color, parents. Another example is partnering with folks who have community organizations that help provide supports for parents. Childcare is a challenge around the world, right? Especially in the US, it's a huge challenge. And so for many parents who want to go to graduate school, they're figuring out how to navigate that. But if you have partnerships that include funding and resources to support parents, that's a great way you're going to attract individuals who say, you know what, this was on my list of needs, and now I don't have to worry because I know that they have the partnership and the supports, and I can easily transition into this community.
Mm-hmm. We are getting right to the end of our time. This has been fascinating for me. Just very briefly, touch on some of the differences for recruiting of master's versus PhD students.
So one thing you really want to think about when it comes to the recruitment of master's students is really knowing the funding models, right? So we know that funding for master's students, a lot of master's students pay out of pocket. And so really thinking through what's the connection point between when they're paying for this, what's the return on investment, and how is this going to more immediately help them jumpstart into a career or transition into a career. So it's really about explaining the value of this master's degree, talking about the timeline to complete the degree, And then we start getting into doctoral degrees, it's important to really think through the research, right? So explaining to people what research is, how we utilize our research within this institution, what are the things that we're trying to accomplish with this. I think that's really important when it comes to understanding the difference between recruiting master's and PhD students. It's also their needs and their goals, right? So I always tell people to really think through the questions that you're asking, not only application, but let's say you're having a virtual event. What types of things do you want to know about this particular group? But more importantly, what are the things you want to share? And so being very explicit that if you have a different set of requirements for your doctoral students, you have a different expectations. For example, like some graduate programs, doc programs require you work 3 to 5 years. And some master's programs don't have necessarily a job or professional experience requirement. These are things you want to be very explicit on and talk about why you have this requirement and why it's important, how this shapes the experience that they're going to have. These are the things that I think are very essential when differentiating between the two degrees.
Mm-hmm. And I would also interject that, especially at the PhD, at the doctoral research level, getting the faculty involved based on the prospective students' interests, getting them involved as a mentor and potentially as their research advisor, I think is important.
Definitely.
Well, this has been, Justin, just a fascinating conversation for me. I love it when I can learn new things. 3 takeaways for university presidents and boards on everything that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. So the first one I would say is to really think through the reallocation and providing resources. And for me, resources are time, people, and money around the support areas. So a lot of students, we didn't get a chance to really dig into it, but a lot of students, prospective students, are concerned about additional supports outside of the program. So counseling services, student support and activities, childcare, housing, making sure that you are resourcing these areas because we know that students need these additional things to be able to thrive in their programs. Number 2, takeaways to really look at your data to identify the issues around needs, who's missing, what are the inequities that exist, particularly around funding, knowing that there are a lot of graduate students that are trying to unionize because they are not experiencing living wages and some of these things. So really thinking through that and identifying trends not only in admissions for your institutions, but even your peer and aspirational institutions. The last thing I would say is to really think through establishing a 1 to 3 year plan to address your recruitment needs. Utilizing different groups. I encourage people to get a group together of alums, of current students, faculty, staff, community partners with the focus on addressing graduate student enrollment. Part of that is talking about this pathway into graduate school.
Those are great takeaways. Thank you. Justin, what's next for you?
So one of the things is I'm on right now my spring tour for my book and workshops that I'm doing. I'm the author of the book, 20 Questions to Answer Before You Apply to Graduate School. So right now I'm going to many different institutions talking about applying to graduate school, helping students write their personal statements. In my business, Apply to Graduate School, we offer support in helping students to find, identify, admit, and thrive in graduate school. And then the last thing I'm really working on now is my graduate recruitment work with institutions. I have a whole workshop, Talent Magnet, attracting top talent to graduate studies. And I'm really looking forward to more institutions. I got a few lined up this spring and looking forward to the opportunity to really help graduate schools develop strategies and a plan, a fully implementable, low cost, effective strategies that you can implement that faculty will buy into, institutions will buy into, and ultimately see success in their recruitment and admissions of graduate students.
Oh, those sound great. Well, Justin, thanks so much for being on the program. I've enjoyed our time together. Look forward to staying in touch and the next time we have you on the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening today, and a special thank you to my guest, Dr. Justin Grimes, founder and CEO of Stick With It and Apply to Graduate School, and author of the book 20 Questions to Ask Before You Apply to Graduate School. Justin, thanks for being on the program. I look forward to the next time we get to talk. Tune in next week when we welcome Erin Hennessy, Executive Vice President at TVP Communications, to the show. Erin is an expert at crisis communications, and she'll be joining us to talk about communications in polarizing situations, something that everyone in a leadership position in higher ed needs to know about in today's hyper-political environment. Thanks for listening, See you next week.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drum McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.